Good morning, Jennie and Marlena. It's so nice to see you on this Monday. How's it going?
Great. How about you?
I'm doing well, thank you. I think it's the most recent recordings I've done have been at like 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night. So to have the natural light benefit right now is a real gift. I'm very grateful that you wanted to
Oh,
schedule for a daytime hour. But Marlena, are you in the actual sunshine? Because I feel like your lighting is impeccable.
I am actually. I'm sitting outside today. It's a
Yeah.
beautiful morning, and I have the sun. And I'm just wondering, is that too much light? Are we good? Or?
No, it's wonderful. It's something that you can't replicate, right? It's that
yeah,
actual
the
sunlight,
natural.
pretty
Yeah.
sweet. And where are you both joining us from today?
I'm in Virginia, right outside DC, in my home right now.
Fabulous.
And I've traveled up to see my children in Staten Island, so I'm in Staten Island today. And
So
usually I'm in Florida, but yeah, I'm in the great NYC today. Really looking forward to this beautiful day.
oh my gosh, it's so nice
Wow.
to be nearby in similar parts with you today, Marlena, and not that far, Jenny, still on
No,
the same coast, the same Amtrak line, all those good things.
Mhm.
But I'm really grateful that both of you took some time in your schedules to sit with me this morning. For anyone who doesn't know either of you, this is Dr. Jennie Plumb Tam and Dr. Marlena Jbara. They both wear many wonderful hats that hopefully we'll speak to a little bit more, but for the purposes of this conversation, especially, we're going to talk about their co-founding of GrooveMDs and what that means for the medical field and the people that it touches and all that good stuff. So just reiterate, thank you for being here and having this conversation.
Thank you for having us, Kara. We're big fans of you.
The feeling is completely mutual. So as you may know, I love to start at the beginning and not really skip a beat. So maybe Jenny will pivot to you first, or we'll direct this question to you first. What were you like growing up? Did you always know you wanted to be a healer of sorts? And were you always having like this creative part of your brain too? Bring us to the present, if you would.
That's such a great place to start, Kara. Thank you for asking. From very, very early on, I wanted to be a physician. Probably around 10, 11, 12, my mom went back to nursing school, and I loved hearing all the stories about medicine. And that inspired me to go into a pre-med program in high school, which then led me to a BAMD program at Brooklyn College, a 7-year program where I met the Dr. Marlena Jbara at age 17, in Brooklyn. So, and I was a very serious, studious researcher and reader growing up. Did not use my creative side too much, and we can get into that a little more. That is something that has only fairly recently developed, and so, but I've always wanted to be a physician, and I went into OBGYN, had slight difficulty in my childhood in various ways, which again has led to some of the finding of GrooveMDs, which we can get into as well later. So thank you
That's
for
beautiful. Yeah. And I think it's so cool that mentioned you were 17 and you and Marlena were crossing paths on the way to becoming doctors, right? I think I took for granted that is, you're so young, like 17 is so young, and also already so on this path, right? That in many ways, maybe I could imagine would feel defined for you, right? There's a very structured route to become a medical doctor. And so I'll be interested to see how you end up finding space for creativity in it as you make it your own. So thank you for sharing that. And Marlena, I would love to hear now your kind of flip side of that before and then after and during your time crossing paths with Jenny.
sure. I'm so grateful to be here, and thank you again for this. My early childhood was somewhat troubled. I had my parents suffered in many ways, and I had a lot of different troubles growing up, and it made me find places that I had a lot of trouble, and I wound up being a childhood drug addict. So I was in rehab very young in my life, and when I graduated, I declared I'd become a physician. There's a lot between in that story, which when I publish, you'll read it. But in this time as a child, as many of us, I sort of overcame a lot of things, as many of us children do. And when I graduated, I declared that I wanted to help others. And that was sort of a life's work. Like I became something in my life, and I found Jennie at the age of 17 when I wound up getting into this really special place called the BAMD program. And I'm so grateful. And I didn't even have a place to live at the time. So meeting Jennie, she let me stay on her couch for years until I actually made it into medical school. So that's the kind of bonding that we had growing up. And we were both studiers. We wanted to be great doctors. We came from difficult beginnings, and we were so thrilled to be part of the fabric of medicine and looking forward. And that's how we came together. And we went through all of what we expected medical school to be, and Jennie can speak to that. But we went through all of that, went and diverged our lives, had families, and it was many years later that we came back together, and we realized we both had a lot of things that happened to us during the course of medicine. And in discovering each other in our friendship and rekindling all of our experiences together, we found that having community and having a voice together really got us going to get what we really wanted out of medicine, because we've never stopped wanting to be amazing healers and physicians and people who contribute to the world. So GrooveMDs has been our answer to finding ourselves through creativity, coaching, and community, and rekindling what it means to be a physician and finding ourselves. So that's what GrooveMDs is to us.
Okay, well, you're both superstars in explaining something succinctly that is so big, right? Like this is your entire life. But I really appreciate you breaking it down in a way that could be digestible for others who haven't been there every step of the way. And I think it's so beautiful how you met in this place of real like vulnerability and intimacy. And it sounds like Jennie making that decision to let stranger Marlena sleep in her house had ripple effects for both of you, right? And just being willing to relate to maybe Marlena in that moment, not even knowing her full story yet, was really cool. And at the same time, Marlena, you shared a lot about reflecting back on these different experiences that shaped your drive and your discipline and your ethic. And I think that's so powerful when you meet with people or you reconnect with someone like Jennie or with friends from a long time back, to think on all these things where I wouldn't choose to have someone else experience them, but because I experienced them, this is pretty awesome how I can use that now to serve other people in ways like
Yeah.
So that's awesome work that you've both been putting forward. I would love to, with that, kind of understand more about GrooveMDs along the timeline. So you're both been physicians for a minute, and this idea came later in the process, right? Or was this always in the back of your head? Tell us more about that.
Well, I can speak to, I think that there was a growing experience throughout my career that there was something more that I wanted to have. There was a conversation out there that wasn't freely spoken about. What were the conversations between physicians or between patients? There were places that I really wanted to add more empathy. I had an interesting early childhood experience where I learned a lot of things about myself and reestablishing community. And I always wanted to reestablish communities, especially when, for me, I was really troubled by the diabetic foot. I was troubled. I'm a radiologist who spends a lot of time reading cases that will eventually go for amputation. And it began there for me that I began to use a disease to sort of funnel who I was into doing something there and having some purpose. So anchoring purpose is a big thing for GrooveMDs. And for me, what I did there was went out into the world and learned, how do you talk to people so they'll listen to you? Because I think that what I thought we needed more communication. So that was the beginning of understanding on a larger front physician distress and what was really in the way of maybe people getting well for themselves and our patients. And by going through a lot of my own strife and sharing with Jennie, it was a place for GrooveMDs to say, wow, there's someone else who's going through the same thing I am. And I know her all my life. I know that what she's saying, and I know where she comes from. So I really was motivated to say, let's join our forces and our experiences and bring GrooveMDs to life. And Jennie had her own experiences. Jennie?
Yeah, and thanks, Marlena, for sharing that. You just after having a flourishing career that I loved as an OBGYN, I'm an OBGYN, retired now. I had a period of time in my life where it was very difficult in my field with a complication and with something called a sham peer review, where I did not have the backing of my department, and I was brought up against the board and the Office of Professional Misconduct, and I just felt a lot of shame and a lot of I isolated, and I didn't share with others. And it was only with reconnecting with Marlena and finally being vulnerable enough, or feeling vulnerable enough to share what I was going through, and realizing that I wasn't alone. That feeling of not being alone was huge. And I want to share that with others. And I want others to know that they're not alone. And that was part of the birth of GrooveMDs. And at GrooveMDs, we feel, as Marlena was speaking of, connection, community, creativity, compassion, and coaching are what we call the 5 C's. And those are our pillars. Those are our foundations of how we feel we got our groove back and how we got joy back in our lives. And that is what we want to share with others in those 5 areas.
Yes, that's such a beautiful mission. And I think, it's such a testament when people can say, I lived through it myself, right? Like, I'm not a life coach who has nothing to do with the medical field. Like, I am a doctor who has suffered and who has learned to not suffer by myself because it's not fruitful. I think that what's really cool is it seems like GrooveMDs maybe is this opportunity to get ahead of the siloing, right? It sounds like, and I can experience even not as a doctor, right? When something happens and I feel embarrassed about it, or I don't want it to shape people's perception of me, it does maybe feel more comfortable to suppress it and put it far away and not deal with it. But in opening up, or maybe making a practice of proactively opening up, there's this cool opportunity, it sounds like. Is that my understanding? It kind of like how you're intending it?
That's exactly it, Karen. I love how you framed that. And that's, we in medical school and in the medical field are trained from day one to not share and not be vulnerable, because, that would just show that we're not strong, or that was the understanding. And to bring that to pre-med students and medical students and residents and, early career physicians, we feel would be huge, in order to the access, sharing is the access to transformation and joy, and being allowed to be vulnerable and share what's going on just brings that all together. And one thing we feel very strongly about is everyone having a seat at the table. Everyone feels like they belong. And by belonging, you get to belonging by sharing what's going on. And if you feel you can't share what's going on, then you just feel so alone.
Yes. I wonder, I love these conversations because they make me excited about the future, and they make me ask more questions. And as you're describing these hurdles, I'm thinking a lot about just the system that we exist in the United States. Like, I'm thinking about the rat race model, right? And an individualistic kind of society. And I'm curious, I don't know if you've encountered it yet with doctors around the globe, as GrooveMDs continues to grow and make a difference. I wonder if different cultural groups who are in the medical field encounter this challenge differently, right? Because maybe some groups are more prone to a community kind of perspective and then can more readily share, or maybe other groups are even less motivated to bring to the surface what's going on because of shame that's associated with it in their lives. I don't know if there's anything about that yet. It just makes me excited.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, you've spoken a lot about different things, but just one thing to have a better understanding of what is physician distress, because it's global and universal. When we're talking about physician distress and what people currently talk about burnout right now, which is what GrooveMDs is dedicated to, ending physician burnout through amplifying these 5C concepts as a way to find rejuvenation. But essentially, globally, many of the people who come to medicine are self-selected in that they're perfectionists. They're people who have, for whatever reason, defined themselves as someone who's going to care for someone else. And a lot of the motivations are concealed. They're not even known to the person. Why some of us seem to care for 30 people, why some of us want to be school teachers to kindergartners and some of us would never do that. Like, there are people who want to go out and really get up under people, and they run the risk of distress because they're usually trying very hard in the world of, like, say, medical school, where there are rigorous hours, there's very little sleep, and there's not a lot of food. Then you go into a residency where there's something called the hidden culture, where they tell you that these are the rules, but there's a whole other set of rules if you really want to be special. Like if you wake up at 4 a.m. and you bring the coffee to the cheap resident, and there's all this hierarchical demands. And in fact, that even gets worse with gender equity and people of color. So when you talk about culturally and globally, the same racism, prejudices, and biases that exist everywhere are deeply ingrained into the walls of medicine and not spoken about. And it can be very painful because it leads to isolation. Let's not even talk about the entire fee-for-service structure. If you put the bucket of money where the surgery is, you're going to get surgery. If you put the bucket of money where prevention is, you're going to get prevention, because money is historically a huge driver, right? And I am not here to judge it. This is the way it is. That's the world we're living in. But that's the world of fee for service. And the system is, by many experts in the world, knows that American systems certainly are breaking down. We're outpacing our ability to pay for it. And that's why, I mean, well, not that's why, but GrooveMDs is interested in the global conversation of what it takes to stay contributing in a way that produces value for people. I think it's possible, and we think it's possible, to have it all. And that's one of the undercurrents of this idea that you don't get to have it all was sort of what we were raised in inside of medicine, right, Jenny? I mean, you had to do this, but you couldn't sleep too. You know, you couldn't have a family and do surgery. You couldn't do that. There were these rules that came from nowhere. And we're interested in the conversation because when we talk about it, we can change it, right?
Okay.
Jenny, did you?
Yes,
Sorry.
thank you. No, and I just want to mention, Kara, I'm glad you asked about a globally, because along those lines, Marlena is part of a global enterprise in radiology, and we're seeing, yes, that it's similar in many, many parts of the world. And so we at GrooveMDs really want to spread this globally, and hope that, you know, we can give everyone a seat at the table in order to be vulnerable and share and be okay to be open and share.
I love that.
And
Go
I
for
was
it.
just going to make a small plug for that. So what she's
Yeah,
speaking
exactly.
to is that we at GrooveMDs are interested in encouraging other people to bring community into their communities. So one of the communities that I'm in several communities as a doctor, right? I'm a radiologist. So when I retired from the toxicity of academic medicine, I knew I loved to teach. So I joined a guy who's doing a global fellowship in radiology for bone and joint. What we're doing there is really a conversation amongst radiologists who are in practice about what their cases are really about, where the edges are for them. For many of us to graduate, there was nowhere else to go unless we're in an academic center, but this provides a place we can discuss. And I look forward to it. This is my day program. I love to talk to my radiologist. I get my popcorn. And so this is joyful. Think about that, multiplying that 1,000,000 times over for all these physicians in their silos and finding joy. We would have a lot of wellness is what is downstream from that. And anyone who's in medicine kind of knows this isn't your usual experience to have a joyful day, you know, going to the office. Usually it's a lot of cases right now, it's pressure. So this is an antidote for burnout for sure. Go on, Jenny, I'm sorry.
Yes.
I get so excited about this stuff.
It's exciting. Yes.
I think that's such an important perspective shift, right? And when you bring to light maybe the things that don't make sense, like why do I have to not have a family to do surgery? Like these are not actually on a continuum. They are two separate entire categories. That's really powerful. Just to question things that don't make sense. Because I think so often we are maybe in that autopilot mode and take for granted. And it sounds like it's been really meaningful personally, and then it has this potential to continue to be meaningful on a global scale, that you are pausing and questioning and coming at it from a different perspective, like using creativity to pause and notice more. It's a great, wonderful cycle that, like you said, kind of is that antidote. This is completely tangential, but Marlena, you mentioned your passion for the foot, and I just want to know if there's any more to, like, do you understand why you're passionate about the foot? Because that would, it makes me nervous to even mention foots getting infected. I don't know that I could.
I mean, you're inviting me into a wonderful conversation. I can take the entire time, but one of the things, it's an interesting story about how I discovered really how to be a groover. But I was sitting in medicine and I was looking at these patients getting amputation after amputation as a radiologist. And my first thought was, these doctors they're not doing something right. Let me research why they keep amputating. Maybe they need another MRI because that's what the ACR said. So I realized after researching that I had a lot of bias because I was researching something that I thought was a bias. And I started to get interested in knowing what the foot doctors were up against. What are your concerns? What can I do as a radiologist to help alleviate this? And I found that education was a way. I'm in New York City, so you might hear the sirens. I just got inspired by a conversation to have with a group of doctors who wanted to talk with me. So as a radiologist, I sort of crossed over on the turf to podiatrists. And I started to realize that empowering each other was making a difference to how the patients were doing. And in fact, my research showed that even though you didn't necessarily stop getting your amputations, you did have a lower death rate. And we began to postulate that these conversations between radiologists and podiatrists were making a difference to patient care. People were getting more attention, and that might make a difference. And that led me to one day, I'm a sculptor as well. I sort of have a hobby. And I said, what do I want to make? And I'm like, I want to make this. I wanted to make feet. So I started making feet. And of course, I was learning about the surgery. So I started amputating the toes myself. And I started to understand how difficult it might be even for a patient, and found compassion through the actual production of the art. All of those things together are part of my love of people and what I found that I can do as a physician, and joining all of that continuum between wanting to be someone who makes a difference, wanting to be a doctor and an artist, and wanting to take care of people and persons. And altogether, that's GrooveMDs and who I am, and what we're bringing to the RadPod community is this education and imaging. So I'm continuing through GrooveMDs to find a voice to my podiatrist to share all of this, and downstream to make a difference for us. Everyone knows someone who's a diabetic, right?
That is so cool. I feel like you are like the case study of right? Like that just was such a great way of connecting all the different dots in your personal walk at this intersection. Oh, I love intersections. It gives me goosebumps. I could go on all day too on that. So even in that, we found a connection now, right? I'll never amputate a foot. I hope. But I love an intersection of two different fields or two different thoughts or schools of thinking. So that's awesome. Like kind of building off of that, I'd love to hear more about the name GrooveMDs. Like, what is it about that really resonated with you? I feel like there's different descriptors you could have clinged to. So the fact that you chose this like groovy kind of word matters.
That's a great question, Kara. And honestly, I love Marlena sharing that about the foot, and that fact that you asked about that, because it's all interrelated, like you said, intersected. She also dances. She's a salsa dancer, and we'll talk more about that later, how that's related to GrooveMDs. But really, the name came from a various combination of things. Number one is Stella Got Her Groove Back, the movie. I don't know if you've seen it or our viewers have seen it, but it's about getting your groove back, meaning getting joy back into your life. And that just resonated with us so deeply. The other aspect is for neuroscience, which is a fascinating field, the grooves in your brain, rewiring the brain. We used to think that the brain was not able to be rewired, that it was not what we call neuroplastic, but now over the last couple of decades, it has been discovered it is. And you can rewire your brain with meditation, with creativity, with dance, with exploring new areas of interest. And so it's kind of a double meaning in that sense. And I'd love if Marlena has anything to add on that. But I think, and the foot, the grooving, the feet. So it's all interrelated.
Well, I just want to make one correction. I'm not a salsa dancer. I'm someone who appreciates salsa dancing, and I love to dance. And it was one of the ways in medical school, residency actually, and my residents who are watching know this. We would go monthly to take a class in the city. And it was a way that we came up out of the quagmire, if that's the right word. We came up out of the quicksand of being residents in we were all trained in Kings County, and it was a very stressful inner city area. So dancing once a month was a way for our group to come back together. And GrooveMDs has partnered with an amazing salsera, an amazing dancer, Amy Dominguez, and we're using her ability to teach and empower dance in GrooveMDs to share that with physicians, because I think there's an amazing connection between salsa and life and coming back into the, your offices and giving of yourself as physicians. I think that's a great place to recharge your energy stores and rejuvenate. So that's what group.
Yes, I love that. And I really appreciate actually. So as you were describing that, Marlena, you made the point to say, I'm not a salsa dancer. I appreciate salsa dancing. I feel like I've done that similarly in like other bands, and people are quick to be like, no, like, that's fine. You can be a salsa dancer. You do that. But I like your approach better because I think when we do claim the title, there's so much expectation that comes with it. And it's not right. Like, I don't have to be there. And that's not to you, Jennie, at all. Like,
yeah.
No.
I think there's a lot of freedom in how you said, I don't have to be a salsa dancer to dance salsa and to enjoy it. And I think that's really special too. So I'm glad that came up.
Yes. And I think as doctors in general, like, it's very hard to even come here and do an interview. We're people who want to always be perfect, to show up. We did it all perfectly. And, that's a perfectionist movement. That's, if you're up to big things, you tend to want it. And dances or any of these creative experiences, that's sort of the key that you don't know. And this idea of going from something that you're unconscious about not knowing to something that you can master is a cycle that we think in life really rejuvenates us. So for something like dance, where you don't even know salsa exists until you hear the music, and then you see someone do it and you say, how? And then someone says the step is 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, and you try. Throughout this is a questioning, and it's sort of like a chance for you to say, I don't know. And for someone who's a high level physician who knows exactly where to make that cut, not knowing something is a great way to move things around and flip your right and left brain quickly without medication or meditation, right? That's just it is medicine. So we believe that these sort of practices help shake up the way we're looking at the way it is for us now.
I love that. And
get your groove on.
Get your groove on. And I think this is actually a cool point to dive maybe into your personal experience of that again too. So you kind of alluded to or teased out that creativity was not always part of your life. Jennie, right? And Marlena, maybe it was part of your life differently in the past versus how embedded it is now. What was that first step like of like, I am going to make a foot out of clay, or I am going to, pick up a paintbrush? And I'd love to hear how it's changed since then too.
Wow, great. So good, because that question just allows me to look back and see how it came into my life. Creativity was not part of my life growing up. I mean, obviously in school, the projects and things like that. But honestly, the very first time was when I had some time to do some creativity. I had just been through a difficult separation in divorce proceedings. I had taken some time off from work, and so I had a little bit of time, and I saw a new painting studio had opened up. So I went to do a painting, and it's a class where they take you through the steps of it. And of course, my perfectionism and of my medical training, I'm not a painter. I'm not creative. I can't do this. Oh my gosh, my first painting was amazing. It was beautiful. I put it on my wall. I loved it. And I was like, look, I can do this. I can use that creative side of my brain. And not only that, it gave me so much peace and joy, and gave me, for me, it was art therapy. I started going several times a week. I tried to do a little bit on my own, but I was still in the beginning of it. So I felt like that the guidance through a painting was better for me. And I just have been inspired ever since. I have so many paintings. I can give you some. I need to sell. My walls are full of them. It became a way of, as Marlena mentioned the word rejuvenation earlier, rejuvenating and getting my joy back and getting my groove back, even before I knew that that's what it was, if that makes sense, So, yeah. And so I will never go back to not having creative outlets. And that led me to other creative outlets as well. So.
Oh, that's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Absolutely. I think creativity for many of us in medicine, I think it's wonderful if you have an established practice, if you brought that in. But for many of us, that all went out the wayside when we got to medical school and residency. There was no time to actually, or it seemed that way. So for me, putting in those salsa days that we all went out together was essential. And I found that to be my creative outlet. But when I also went through a divorce, and during that time when I was sort of getting all myself together again, thinking, how do you begin again? I joined a sculpture class, and what moved me was the teacher's laugh. She would have this really effervescent laugh, and I was thinking it just made me laugh. And I really didn't feel drawn to the clay. I didn't know what I was doing there. Being that when you're going through all these difficult times, it can be hard to generate. So I just said, let me just do what I know. I know anatomy. Let me make a foot. And as I did it, I fell in love with the process of the contours and the laugh and the experience, because it's not clear what changes us in these moments. I don't think you can just sit down with a perfect piece of paper and pencils and bring it. There's an experience that you begin to allow yourself to have. That's what creativity does for me. It stops me from worrying about the 50 things on my action to-do list, which has made me a very successful doctor, and gives me a slight amount of time to do whatever it seems I'm doing that seems to synergize that other list again. I'm ready to go when I'm finished.
Yes.
I feel good. And that is something that you tell people and you tell yourself, but until you do it again, you forget each time how rejuvenating it is to pause, reflect, fill up your stores again, source yourself, and then go on to choose what you want to do, really have all of it, as we're trying to share in GrooveMD.
Yes, I think that's so important. And another testament to just the need to perspective shift, or at least like re-center in what is your motivation, right? Why are we doing the thing? If you are using art as a way to relax and decompress, and there's not someone with an effervescent laugh, like I think you're in the wrong place. Right? You need to go seek that experience out, and not the sterile environment that's going to poo-poo you if your lines are not straight. Like that's not your purpose. It might be, Picasso's protege's purpose, but that doesn't need to be why you're in that environment. And I think, having that lesson from that creative practice could be so powerful for someone who then is like, what is the purpose of going to medical school? To know how to deliver coffee at 4 a.m. to the head resident? No. So like, maybe I don't need to do that, right? We can get so caught up in the minutia and forget that big purpose. And it sounds like GrooveMDs is taking a really meaningful stance or helping people to practice going through the actual motions of doing things that are aligned to your purpose. And that's wonderful.
I know. And Jenny, I'm sorry if you were going to say something, but that is what GrooveMDs is keenly interested in. It's the first conversation, not necessarily going to give you a million tips and tricks to fix this or have that. But that first conversation where you ask yourself, is this what I'm in for? Is this really what I'm signed up for? Do I love this? And if I don't, what parts are really working? Just wake up for a second and ask you, step back out of your life. I've got the perfect family. I've got the house. Do you have it the way you want it? Or was there a question deeper down? Because I think many of us run into our lives and it's really hard to say, gosh, I did all this, but I don't necessarily want all of it the way it is. Maybe I could have, you don't even question it. That's why I think a lot of us burn out. We go down a path that we continue to try to get the same thing we wanted, but with moving very little around. And I guess what we're here to share is on the other side of it, it's the most unique, small moments that seem to change it in a big way. So if you, like, I just signed up for a comedy class and I don't think I'm funny. I say it all the time. I try to tell everyone I'm doing this and I'm funny, but I have a huge fear about this because I flood. But just in making that move, I feel so empowered. I know you don't have to do something as extroverted that you can tell yourself what you can do, but somehow this matters. So that we're in GrooveMD interested in that first conversation to flipping it and saying, I want more.
Yes, it's I love how you describe that. And it's so funny that you mentioned like the perfect house, blah, blah, blah. My dad, one of the things that always stands out to me, he's a physician as well, as you know, he says, in the 90s, it seemed like the thing that you grow up in Brooklyn, Queens, etc. You get the job as the doctor, the lawyer, etc., and you move to Long Island, right? Or you move to a suburb, and that's like your self-actualization, whatnot. And he's like, that was the biggest scam ever. Like, I love Manhattan. I can't believe they suckered me into going and sitting on the LIE for 3 hours a day and like falling asleep, hitting my head, like just being so frustrated. So if you can have that aha a little bit earlier, why not?
Yes, Kara. Thank you. That is so beautiful. And I love how you shine the light, Kara, on exactly thinking outside the box. What your words made me discover and think is that this is about thinking outside the box and doing something different in order to get alignment in your life. And it's just beautiful. And that's such a great example of your dad. Thank you for sharing that.
Oh, my pleasure. You're both setting the tone for a really energizing week. So I continue to be glad that we're having this conversation. And I want to know a little bit more now about Doctors Anonymous too, and how that fits into GrooveMDs, or whether it's a completely separate entity. And let's go there.
Yeah, let's go there. Thank you. Doctors Anonymous, as Kara just mentioned, is a book that I'm writing in conjunction with the Creators Institute. And it's about my journey through something called Codependence Anonymous, which is a 12-step group for people pleasers in a nutshell. And how I discovered that I am codependent was during a very difficult time during my life, professionally and personally, when I was undergoing professional, what I talked about earlier, being brought up against the Office of Professional Misconduct, which again is very common. Lots of physicians have been through it, but nobody talks about it. And so finally opening up and sharing about it and reading and researching, and something called Codependence Anonymous just kept jumping onto my radar. And I went to my first meeting and it was like, whoa, where has this been? My whole life. These were my people. This was my tribe. And this was like, it just, I cried that first meeting. I cried many meetings after, didn't share for a long time, but it was where I finally realized what I had been doing my whole life was for everybody else and not for me. And not to say it should be all about me, but our life should be about ourselves and our own peace and joy and rejuvenation. And that's what Codependence Anonymous gave back to me. It got me back to me, my core, my authentic Jennie. And so my book is about, Doctors Anonymous is about that journey through the 12 steps of Codependence Anonymous.
Wow.
I just want to share it. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I love that Codependence Anonymous is a thing. I think, in a social work lens, or from my experience, sometimes I encounter people who have different diagnoses, or they receive a diagnosis and it's new and they're like kind of, bummed about that. It's like, no, this is great encouragement that you're not the first person who's experienced this. That means that there's other people who have wisdom to share and a community. And so for you to get to kind of, be planted in that group or made aware that that was a thing, sounds like a really important part of your journey.
A huge part. Yes. Thank you.
So what has it been like to write a book? Is this your first time?
This is my first book. And when you were asking about creativity before, my mind went straight to the art and the painting, but this has been exercising the creative juices and the creative side of my brain in a way I've never experienced. And it's fascinating. We've met through the process, and I'll leave it to Marlena to explain. She had started writing a book as well and introduced me to this process. And just writing in community with the Creators Institute has been life-changing. Met so many people who are writing books about all different topics all across the world. And interviewing them and sharing with them our process in community has helped me see what value I have. It helps me. I know I had value, but this has just really helped me come out of my shell, shall we say, and really want to share my process with anyone who wants to be shared with.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And and by the way, her book will be out in January, and I'm just so thrilled to, each chapter is like a chocolate. We unwrap it and you get to really explore. So Jennie, thank you for putting that out in the world. And she had mentioned that, so when I had retired from academic medicine, being someone who I thought a lot about leaving medicine and thought about what I needed during the time that I was going to be leaving. And like she said, this Creators Institute provided a community, and I wanted to talk about the life that I had lived inside of medicine. That was my dream of writing a book and wrapping it around, sort of pulling all the things out of me into a book and putting it there to move on, so to speak. So when I began this process, I was amazed at the kind of transformations within myself as each chapter unfolded. And I looked at my experiences in COVID. I was a repurposed frontline radiologist. So I went through a lot of loss during that time. So this book was a great place to anchor myself. And it was so powerful that I decided that I would take more years to write it, that I wasn't going to do this in this. I need time to stretch that. And Jennie, as she began to see what was going on there, she says, I have a book in me. And I was thinking, I looked at her. Now I've known her since I'm 17. She's the best note taker there is. She's the most voracious reader. She reads 10 books at once. I'm not kidding you. 10, 3 on the Kindle, 3 on the audio. I mean, it's insane. So when she started writing, it became a fire. Like the author was clearly inside of her whole life. So the joy of anything that I had to do with this was watching someone really find their tribe. So it's been a blessing, this Creators Institute, for both of us. And Jennie, I'm just thrilled to, support her in this amazing thing and actually be blessed by her gifts. And my book I'm writing as well. So it's really great to be around this community is what I'm saying. And for anyone who's interested in sharing your story, the Creator Institute is something available to all of us. So please sign up, go and check it out.
Oh,
Definitely.
I love hearing about it from both of your perspectives. And I think just like kind of as an aside, it's so delicious to see your friendship with each other. Like it's so encouraging. It's such a breath of fresh air. And I think it is that laugh that you saw in the painting class, like if people encounter GrooveMDs, they get to encounter this working relationship that is so good. So I'm loving experiencing that as we, manage these 3 different screens at the same time. I don't think that would come naturally to everybody. But you can see that you two are so closely intertwined, and that's so good. We need more woman friendship things and platforms for them. So if someone is excited, when someone gets to listen and is excited about engaging GrooveMDs and Doctors Anonymous, is there a recommended approach? Like, should someone read all of Doctors Anonymous and then reach out and go to a dance class with you? Or what does engagement with both of them look like? How would you, recommend someone get on board with this cool journey?
One of the main things that we're excited about right now is that we are creating our new website and designing our new website with an amazing web designer, and it should be launching very soon. We have one currently, so you can always go to GrooveMDs.com and sign up there. And it's there. We'll share our offerings and our upcoming events, which are varied and all across the board. And it will also have some information about Doctors Anonymous as well. And the pre-ordering of the book has been completed, but you can definitely reach out to us and we can get you on the list to order the book in the new year when it does get published officially.
Awesome.
And then, yeah, Marlene.
Yes, so you want to go to GrooveMDs.com. And by the time this airs, probably the website will be launched by now. And what we're doing there, we love for you to sign up and join our newsletter. And we run events. So this year we'll be having a dance event where you can sign, if you're a woman physician and looking to get your groove on, we'll be setting up some dance classes mixed in with coaching, talking about community and creativity, and more on that. But we also have Facebook Live, and we would like to get you in our conversations, and we'd love to hear anybody's story about burnout. We want to share with you. We would love for you to share with us, and we can share our resources. We see ourselves as a source for you. So our website is embedded with all the phone numbers you can use to get free physician online coaching, to have any kind of support around your mental health. We have obviously suicide hotlines connected to us. We have more information about our art and we have a whole section on blogs. We're interested in medical students. We have a section for Brandeis medical students who are part of Baseline Med. So we write blogs for them, and you want to check us out there at Baseline Med. We're available for speaking engagements. We've currently spoken to the Society of Female Urologists, and we're well versed on subjects such as women's negotiation inside of medicine. We can outline what sexual harassment might look for you in your environment, so that you could have some way of dealing with things or having a start. We're conversation starters. I mean, I can go on and on, but please check us out. Get on our website, GrooveMDs.com.
Yes, I think that's so helpful how you described it. So thank you. And I, I'm a big sister, so I haven't had like a lot of big sisters for me, but when I have had big sisters, like it makes such a difference. And I feel like what I'm hearing from this is like, you guys will come alongside someone and be the big sister and be like, we walked through this thing. This is, the resource that we've uncovered. And what a sweet thing to have another big sister in an area that matters to you, right? My background is in project management a little bit. So I do like to get a little bit out of these conversations of like, how is it done? And it caught my eye that you used this crowdfunding approach to step-by-step kind of timeline the book process. I wanted, if you would share about, how you made that decision and what it's been like to walk through it with that affirmation along the way that people are believing in this and want to see it in the world. Like, I'm very curious.
Yes, oh my gosh, Kara, you hit on such a good point, because that was very difficult for me. I am not a type of person who wants it, historically has able to ask for help or reach out to other people. And it's actually part of the Creators Institute. And that is their foundation and their way of doing it. It wasn't really my decision. It's when you sign up for the Creators Institute, that is part of the process. And it just brought me again, out of my shell and out of, a way of being. It moved me into a new way of being that I had something that people might want to know about. And when you say that about believing in me, yes. And people come, it was so nice to see people coming out of the woodwork a little bit to believe in me and my book. And it's been such a great process.
I love it. Go ahead, Marlena.
That was what the attraction, the entire attraction to the Creators Institute for both of us initially is we had never had these experiences. We had traditional publishing. I had never thought anyone would ever want to read our books. Traditional publishing means that it's usually just like medicine is a fee for service kind of structure. And this really changes the playing field. So when Jennie and I first began, it didn't matter if we were going to get it out there. We were going to try and see, do we have something to share with the world? Because that's what crowdsourcing is. You begin to share what your book is really about, and anyone who's really involved or wants to do that will buy it. And it's a much higher price than your average $9.99 book. So if you want it, you have to really show interest. So this brings people together in a very unique way, because you begin to purchase, or the consumer really goes towards what they want. And there's a conversation just because there's value and merit. It's not because of who you are or your name or who you know. And I think that that's who we are at GrooveMD. We want to be in that conversation of having it all anywhere you are. So starting from nothing, Jennie started from nothing and has had more backing than she even dreamed of. And I'm not surprised, because by January, I'm sure there'll be many more people in our arena who will be wanting to connect with us. But I highly advocate anyone who is wondering where they are in the world to go out there and start questioning and asking and pushing through those walls of what we think people may not want to hear about. They may want to hear. Give it a chance. So
even if
we find love on the other side of it.
Yes. Yeah. I love how it makes the process more accessible too, I think, right? And more authentic, it sounds like. And also just more authentic to GrooveMD's mission, in marketing, we think about these like experiential kind of circumstances. And so a brand, like if Kate Spade, wants to have a pop-up for Fashion Week, they want the floor to reflect Kate Spade. They want the walls to reflect it. They want the soap in the bathroom to reflect it. And so for you, like, the process of making the book reflects what you believe in, it sounds like too, right?
Yes.
Lets it hit people in a different way at the core.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you had all these beliefs, but then you went to the publisher and said, I believe this is good, you handle it from here.
Right. It comes a whole different approach, a whole different perspective. And it allows everyone to have a seat at the table and belong. It really brings people together, the whole process, and Yeah, it's just incredible.
In fact, yes, in fact, when you begin that process, you begin to see that there are many reasons to write a book, that there are interests in amplifying a certain message or sharing or transforming your own experience. So and in writing, and again, in creativity in general, you find yourself, whatever part, it doesn't have to look like anyone else. There's no end point, just like your dad said, ending up in Long Island was someone else's dream that he went towards. So we don't really, there's nothing bad and wrong about any of these discoveries. At any point you make it, then you're right on time. It's really about you getting what you want. And like I try to tell my son, just tell yourself. Tell yourself all alone what you want. And people, it's a very daunting experience, right? I mean, many of us think we are, but like your dad said, he loves Manhattan. What made him think that for 20 years that was the way to go?
Exactly.
Never too late.
Never too late. And now they're happily back on the island, the
On a
right
farm.
island. So you mentioned, burnout being something that GrooveMDs addresses a lot. You spoke to some resources that are really important that you link on your site, from everything to proactive to like reactive, we're in an emergency. I think in our previous conversations, we've talked about this idea, maybe that you both share, of this wounded healer in each of us. And I want to know more about why that matters to your work, and maybe how it makes your work pretty universally accessible or relatable.
I'd love Marlena to start with this one, and maybe even mention her sculpture, Wounded Healer, which is amazing. So,
Thank you. Well, as I mentioned about my glorious sordid past, going through life in this way, I use words loosely, but I came from a place where I had a lot of shame. I really wanted to be like everyone else, just like every child does. And most people don't speak about it with such conviction as I am standing in front of you. 50 years of my life has passed. So I've done a lot of work early. I found my first step into a place where I could start to look at myself and who Marlena really was in drug rehabilitation called Daytop. And what it was as a child when I went in there was a study in integrity. They talked about integrity, this word about keeping your word, and the importance of word to yourself. That was a really big concept in the 70s when I was growing up. And in this time, I overcame some wounds. I knew I had shame and anger and all sorts of things, like many children do, by the way. Many of us are fortunate enough to be in wonderfully intact, beautiful, nourishing families, but many of us suffer from a lot of different experiences, and it's no one's necessarily fault, but it exists. So this wounded healer inside of me had healed at that time. And I said, I'm going to be a doctor. I want to be safe and sure. And you go through life and all those wounds are somewhat covered. But then you go to medical school and it's reawakened through the toxicities of your environment. Again, not blaming, but we all came from a different place. So having stressful nights or not sleeping or not eating or having people really yell at you or not having any kind of positive feelings in that particular environment, which is characterized a lot of what we grew up with in medical school in our ages. We had wounds. And then you come out and you're expected to then perform. You have to take care of people. Forget that maybe now you can have your life. Now you can have your family. So these wounds are traveling all the way through. And if at some point we're not addressing them, it may not be clear to us why we're, as physicians, 400 of us are committing suicide yearly, or that we're suffering from anxiety and depression, or that even if you're not doing those things, many of us hide gambling, drug addiction, alcoholism, relationships that don't work. Not that divorce is an addiction, but our families are showing that it's not working in our families. There's a lot of areas where we've got all this terrible unrest. And then you come back and you have to handle 60 patients a day or 30 patients a day or some exorbitant number in the face of COVID and more and more and more. And you can see the burnout is happening and our wounds are gaping. So our conversation right now is about rejuvenating that through the 5 C's. That it is possible to love your life, which I've been spending a lot of my adult life looking at this very closely. I love my life. I want to continue to grow it. And I'm here to share what worked for me. What worked for me was getting in the clay and asking myself, how does this feel? Or dancing with my friend, or bringing others into it, or quieting down and listening to a friend. All of these things are a conversation that currently I don't see existing in medicine, not in any pervasive way. So we, along with many women of our day, are in a mission to create community. And GrooveMDs, this is our version of it: coaching, creativity, community. And one thing that we didn't mention and should mention on top of it all, self-compassion. Every moment is an opportunity to have it all. And it begins at that first conversation. Jennie, thank you for letting me say
No,
all
and I
that.
love, she speaks so
Please
beautifully
share.
about this, which is why I love having her share about this. But and I love the self-compassion component is so important. In medicine, we have so many ways to treat wounds, right? Wounded heal, we get wounded, but we don't actually treat our own wounds. We treat everybody else's wounds, which is great. That's what we need to do. We have ways of doing that. Antibiotics, we have incision and drainage, IND, we have lots of surgery, we have, all different ways. But what are our ways? And we're helping to discover for ourselves and hopefully for others with GrooveMDs ways of healing those scars or taking away the scars and healing the deep wounds that are there. It starts with self-compassion. Once I discovered self-compassion, plug to Kristen Neff. She's amazing. Just read her books, look at her work. Self-compassion, I did not have it. I didn't have it. I don't know why I didn't have it. Probably because I'm a wounded child, which became a wounded healer, and learning to get self-compassion went deep into the wound and just started to excavate it and really helped me start to explore my creativity and explore my connections with others, explore community, explore my own view, self-compassion and how to do that. I mean, it's a skill just like any other skill. And so we want to share that and share our process so that others may benefit from it.
Yes. Oh, thank you both so much. It's so encouraging to hear that although there are these deep lows that are possible and sometimes feel unavoidable, there are ways to get out of them. There's ways to build up from them. There's communities to come alongside you in them. All of those good things are out there and possible through your organization and this effort as one example. On the flip side of that, so we talked about, some of those lows and that burnout. Why does having personal creative practices matter, right? How is that a necessary counterbalance that you've found? What keeps inspiring and motivating you to lean into these experiences like the comedy class and writing a book and doing all these things they take a little bit of risk up front, but maybe have been fruitful for you?
I just want to make a plug for that. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, please go ahead, Marlena.
The American, just in speaking, Jennie had mentioned the sculpture, The Wounded Healer. In that, what we have learned to bring out in others was this idea. We wanted to bring art to our communities. So one of the things that I've been advocating for many years was art inside of radiology. And for years, I was on a task force to bring that to the American College because I wanted to share that art in radiology is the lifeblood of our practice. And in visual art and visual imaging, we can connect the two. And this last year, I created a sculpture which was part of a collective of the American College of Radiology Task Force in the Arts. So we now have an art show every year going on, and we're bringing more and more students and residents to share their art. So this is one of the positive ways that we are beginning to infuse creativity at the highest levels of medicine and have it be just as important as anatomy.
And that's actually a beautiful, in my opinion, answer to the question that you posed, Kara, because that is how we do it. We transform ourselves with our creativity. For me, exploring these areas of creativity have helped me to start to heal the deep wounds that I've had. And it's a positive cycle in that sense. It inspires me and motivates me to do more and to build communities with that, from that, and with that, and and that's what I'm doing with Doctors Anonymous. That's what we're doing with GrooveMDs. That's what we're doing with Marlena's doing with the radiology community and the podiatry community. And so it's a positive cycle. Creativity leads to building communities, and then brings them in for the coaching and the community and the connection and the creativity and the compassion, and just it builds on each other. For me, also writing the book has been a cathartic journey. There's been a lot of grieving throughout the writing process, which again helps excavate the wounds and heals the wounds and peels the scars off in order to really heal those wounds. It's been a very cathartic journey, and yeah.
Oh, I think that's such a good way of describing it, right? Sometimes sitting in the place and doing that work or letting yourself reflect and dive into some of the hard is something we want to avoid at all costs. But it sounds like it allows you to reap the benefits of having walked through those things so that it can be something that is meaningful that you take with you and turn into something beautiful like a sculpture or something that causes someone else to see the world in a slightly different way, which is probably really satisfying to witness too.
You mentioned hard, and that is part of, I don't want to say the trick, but one of the things about recovery. So recovery in general is a global concept that's really worth knowing about if you're human, right? How do we recover from anything? And being physicians is sort of like being like an athlete. You're in the business of taking care of people, and understanding how to recover is part of it. And that, I think all of what we do is about recovery, but the main blood of it, using all of this compassion, creativity, the coaching element, seeing something as not as hard but possible, that it's a thing to do, just walking into it. Like for 5 years at least, I've said I'm going to be a comedian, but this is the first time I put money down on a class. Those are the steps that change it all. You know, that first conversation that I'm going to take it from something indistinguished in my life, because I think a lot of us in medicine feel that what Jenny and I are saying, maybe are not saying it outright this way, but have a feeling that there's something more. This is not what they signed up for. And what can we do about it? They can quit, which is what's happening, the great resignation, right? You can just leave. You can maybe not go into it, or you can choose to do something different. And I think the students of today, as reflected in more of your generation, Kara, is up on it, and they know they're our tribe. We find that when we talk this way, they want to blaze trails that matter to them in their communities. That is really important. And not that it's not important to us, but like your dad, we're of this community, spend a lot of time in Long Island already. So now, we want to change from the student level up through. GrooveMDs is interested in, getting the up under the earliest of our medical communities and making a difference in the next, long after we're gone.
Yes. Oh, it'll be so great to continue to see how that unfolds and the people who get to resonate with this story and then also benefit from you having already walked some parts of it that they might be in the middle of right now. So as we think about, the people who are wanting to get their groove back or wanting to dive into a creative practice, put up money down on a thing, is there any wisdom that you would share with them to get them started? Maybe a breadcrumb from the bigger picture of GrooveMDs and Doctors Anonymous?
For me, one of the biggest steps has been to share with someone else, meaning put it out there into the world, even if it's writing it down in your own journal or sending an email to yourself or sending a text to your friend. For the last 5 years, I've had something called a gratitude buddy, which is someone else in one of my 12-step groups told me about. And so every day, this gratitude buddy and I, we share 3 things that we're grateful for. Some days it's really hard to find three things. Sometimes we have 100 things, and that has changed my world and changed my life. And in part of the gratitude has been little things like, I'm grateful that I wrote 100 words today, or I'm grateful that I got outside today some days, and so that piece of wisdom is to just share with someone in whatever form that takes for you. That might be a gratitude buddy relationship, or that might be a journaling, or it might be just texting my twin sister today. I'm going to do this art class. I'm going to sign up for the comedy class. I'm going to do this. Please hold me accountable. Having a little bit of an accountability buddy has also been helpful for me.
Yes, that is huge.
And I think that's awesome, Jenny. And I absolutely, I just got in on her gratitude buddy recently, and I'm amazed at what they do inside of there. So this is a wonderful place to partner for accountability as well. I think that when I think about where to start, it doesn't always seem clear that something that I'm either broken down or I have some kind of negative reaction. That's always the place to start to look where the wound comes up in our everyday life, in our frustrations. And at one moment, we just accept it. But if we asked ourselves the question, what would make this move? Or what I don't like about this. Take a second to distinguish the way it really is, and for 1 second dream about the way it could be. That is a really hard thing to do, but what we tend to do is stay inside of the fight and the argument. We feel bad and we find some way of feeling better about it, and then we move on. But truly looking at something that's bothering you and asking yourself what I don't like about it is the beginning of asking yourself what I do want. When first someone told me I would leave my academic job and I would do whatever you want to do, I was like, no, I need my job. That's my paycheck. And I'm a doctor. Remember where I came from, I'm not giving that up. But as time went on, I began to see that there were more ways to be a doctor than the way that looked. And that as I grew courage and I began to ask myself, it was only in the inquiry. So the inquiry is where we think is the beginning. Ask yourself what you really want, and GrooveMDs will tell you we can have it all.
Yes.
Oh my God, I love that so much. One thing I want to add is
We're
curiosity.
better together.
Oh, sorry. When she says inquiry, it's all about curiosity. That being curious about things has really opened up so many doors for us and for me, and it's just been incredible. So
Yes, I love
we
that.
might have to make it 6 C's and add curiosity. We've been talking.
Not opposed. I think that's pretty special. And in social work, we call that the miracle question. And it's such an important therapeutic intervention, actually, because it challenges someone to just say, you know, I could actually, like, there's things that could change this, right? Like, I might not have all the resources. I might not have all the means. It might look pretty sticky or pretty bad right now, but that is such a powerful first step of like, well, what would not bad look like, right? Is it just a change in the having a snack at 2 p.m. because you're so hungry that you're angry? Or is it something more seismic, like I'm in the wrong field, right? This is not the right identity, things like that. So I love that you called that out too and are seeing that be meaningful. Finally, as we are wrapping up, and it's been such a beautiful, time to share it with you, what are some final things you would like people to leave knowing about both of you and the work that you do together and separately? And what are you each looking forward to right now?
Well, I'm so happy it's fall, and I just love the cooler weather. So I'm looking forward to watching fall surround us. And I'm in the northeast kind of, so I'm enjoying that. But in general, for our work, I'm just so looking forward to sharing what we have discovered with others, and however that, in all the different forms that's coming up. It's exciting times, and we have a lot going on, and we're so excited to share it with the world and go from there. And I'm very excited about the book coming out in January. So
As you should be. That is awesome.
I'm so excited for you too, Jenny. It's been a long haul. And as Jenny mentioned, we're excited for several of our endeavors coming to fruition. Our website will be up at the end of the month. And as Jenny mentioned her book, I'm beginning the Rad Pod community, which is a global endeavor to bring foot doctors towards the conversation of what they're really seeing on x-rays to help those diabetic patients I mentioned. Looking to partner and build communities with other amazing women physicians who are talking the talk of empowerment. And of course, getting our groove on through salsa and watercolor art. We'll be back painting this year and learning from our teacher how to just draw what we see. So we'll keep everyone involved and keep you in the loop. Check us out at GrooveMDs.com.
Yes. Thank you so much, both of you, for sharing your story and your encouragement and the skills that you continue to collect and put to good use for your fellow females, fellow doctors, fellow humans. It has been such a privilege to learn about you in a new light, and I'm really looking forward to sharing your story with this corner of the world. So thank you again.
thank you so much.
Thank you, Kara.
My pleasure.